On the howitzer training, is this first cohort going to be the only cohort, or do you need to do?
We anticipate there'll probably need to be more.
Okay, and also, where is the training happening and who is doing it?
It's outside of Ukraine, and I'm not at liberty to talk about exactly who's doing it.
Are U.S. troops doing the training?
I'm not at liberty to talk about who's doing it. Travis.
Thanks. I wasn't sure if you would see me back here in this dark corner. There's been a cluster of suicides on the George Washington carrier. And I know the Secretary has an ongoing effort to try to understand suicides. And he's looking at, I think, 8 different facilities. And you had said before that that list could grow. Are there any plans to look at ships? And do you think that ships provide unique circumstances that need to be understood when it comes to suicide?
Well, the Navy's still investigating these deaths, and so I don't want to get ahead of that, as you might understand. So let's put that aside for just a second. But each death is tragic in its own right, regardless of how. Our thoughts and prayers continue to go out to the families and frankly the shipmates, because they're affected too. They're part of a sailor's family. I know that from experience. The Secretary's expectation for the IRC on suicide is that it will look across the force. So absolutely, he wants it to look at shipboard life, shipboard duty, just as well as duty in remote locations. Alaska has had this issue. He wants a broad scope and view of suicides across the force, so not just at installations, if you will. And certainly he would like that to include conditions of shipboard life. And I think, I mean, I've served at sea on ships. I've served on ships that were in shipyards. In each of those environments is challenging. I think we have to be a little humble when we're talking about suicide, and it's just human nature to want to point to something and say, well, that's the reason. It's this problem or this culture, or it's because the ship is doing this instead of that. And I think we have to be really careful jumping to those conclusions, because what compels an individual to take their own life is it's individual, and it's complex. And I think, as the Secretary has said many times, a sense of humility going into this is really, really important. So obviously, as we look across the force, we certainly want to look at things like command climate and culture and mission and op tempo, the tempo at which we're pushing people. All those things are stressors in life. Some of them could contribute to the problem of suicides, but again, it's a very individual thing. The other thing we want to do, Travis, is again, with humility, be willing to consider what we don't know and to talk to experts who are smarter about this than we are. We have terrific mental health professionals in the military, but there's people outside the ranks that in the private sector that really do focus in on this particular issue, and we want to avail ourselves of their knowledge and wisdom and be willing to, again, be humble about what we don't know and ask tough questions. When the Secretary was in Alaska, several months ago, he took time to sit with mental health professionals from the local university who specialized in issues surrounding suicide, and he found it very illuminating. Also very daunting, because they conveyed very clear to him how tough this is, an issue to wrap your arms around.
Do you know if the situation with the GW is going to be folded into this larger effort on suicides? Is it something that we're still waiting to see how it turns out?
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't want to get ahead of the Navy's investigation here. The IRC isn't really designed to look at a specific issue or a specific individual act of suicide. It's really designed to look across the force at the factors that compel an individual to take their own life, and what those factors are, and how we can, as an institution, how can we help mitigate those. Yeah, it's not designed on a particular incident. Yeah, John?
Thanks. Are these Phoenix Ghost drones also already in the Air Force arsenal, or
Yes.
are you sending all of them to?
They're already in. I mean, when you draw down authority, you're drawing down from your inventory, so it's in our inventory. Yeah.
Are these more capable than the Switchblade? Is that why?
They have different capabilities than the Switchblade.
Are you able to say what
No,
those?
that's about as far as I'm going to go on it.
And speaking of unmanned systems, have those unmanned coastal defense vessels arrived in Ukraine yet? And can you shed any more light on what those are beyond what you've said?
I don't have an update for them. Yeah, in the back there.
Thank you, sir. Today, Russia announced that they are sectioning dozens of U.S. officials, and I believe that your name is one of them. So, do you have any response about that? This is the first question. The second question, how much these sections make your communications with Russian counterparts more difficult, especially in military issues?
I'm sorry, say the last one again.
How much these sections make the communications between you as DOD officials and the Russian sides more difficult?
The sanctions aren't having an effect on communications. We've been trying to have communications at the higher levels with the Russians now for several weeks, and they clearly aren't interested in that. And the fact that there are sanctions levied against either side, I don't think that's a factor in the lack of communication. And right now, we believe is we have believed, but certainly today, as offensive operations begin anew in the Donbass, that this is exactly the kind of time that we need to be talking to Russian leaders at senior levels. But so far they've been unwilling to engage in that. And as for me, I mean, I looked at everybody else on the list. That's a pretty fine group to belong to, so I'm okay with that. Yeah, Tom.
For those of us of the Vietnam generation who were draft eligible, the Battle of Khe Sanh captured.
I just want to make it clear, Tom, that I was not in that grouping. You said we. I don't want you putting me in that group, pal.
Those of us, and not you.
Yeah, but I didn't. I just wanted to state for the record that I'm not those of us.
Thanks for reminding me. Khe Sanh was a big battle in Vietnam where the U.S. was able to supply a surrounded Marines until they were able to succeed in liberating them. Then fast forward to the Bosnian War, when we'd fly into Sarajevo, on the planes would do a maneuver called a Khe Sahning, where they would come in and jump down to avoid ground fire. I reference these points thinking of what's happening in Mariupol, where it's surrounded. How has the U.S. military progressed since the days of Khe Sanh and through Bosnia to be able to supply, should a case come up where the U.S. military is in a Mariupol situation, are they able to supply them, to relieve them, to provide ammunition?
Are you referring to like airdropping?
I'm referring to whatever possibilities there are. Airdropping is one of them, yeah.
Well, look, the president's been very clear. We are not going to have U.S. forces fighting in Ukraine, and that includes in the skies over Ukraine. And that policy has not changed because of the potential that it could lead to direct armed conflict with Russia.
I wasn't asking about the U.S. in Mariupol. I was citing Mariupol as a reference point. If that happened in the future, has the U.S. changed its way of delivering supplies as it did in Khe Sanh and so forth? In other words, we're talking about the U.S. military capabilities in a situation like that.
I'm afraid I am not only not an expert on artillery, I'm not an expert on airdrop supplies and logistics. We can get you in touch with somebody here at the Pentagon who can give you a much deeper dive on how we do resupply from the air. Obviously, we have that capability, but I'm afraid I'm not qualified to offer much on that.
And anybody who looks at you realizes you're not part of the Vietnam generation.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so. Thank you.
I want to tap your expertise on defense contracting.
Can we just go to another question now? This is going to be a short exchange, Tony.
April 1st, you guys announced $300 million for the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative. That's not drawdown authority, that's contracting. So far, you've done one contract for Pumas, but not for the breadth of the other list, including switchblades and laser-guided rockets. Where are those contracts?
Yeah, we're working hard on that. I mean, I can tell you, Mr. LaPlante, our new Undersecretary for Acquisitions and Sustainment, is personally leading this effort. You're right, the Puma contract is the first one let. It won't be the last, but we're working hard on that right now.
Energizing the defense industrial base, you guys keep talking about that. Has the Pentagon, has Secretary Austin or Secretary Hicks decided to invoke the so-called the DX rule on programs? DX is the highest rated acquisition program. It's like MRAPs in the Gates era. Are any programs being eyed to reconsider them DX highest priority?
I don't have any decisions to read out with respect to the DX rating, Tony. I mean, this is something that we look at periodically. What is and what isn't given a DX rating and what that rating should be. I don't have any updates for you on that, and I don't want to get into internal deliberations about the contracting process. We've let the one for the Pumas. We're working that. And Mr. LaPlante and his team are working very hard on the remaining contracts that will be led under that $300 million.
Phoenix Ghost got a lot of, everybody's asking you about it. Will you be able to start talking a little bit more when people start putting photos on Instagram and TikTok and Facebook when it's over there?
We'll see.
Well, seriously, you should.
I appreciate.
Take a look at that.
No, I appreciate the advice, and we'll. Look, there's some things that we can talk about more plainly and openly than others. We are never straying from our desire to help Ukraine defend itself. And there's going to be things we can talk about clearly regarding our effort to do that. And there's going to be things that we're just not going to want to talk that much about, despite what's on Instagram or TikTok or whatever other social media site you named. Just because it's out there doesn't mean that we're always going to be able to be fully candid about every single capability. It's not. I mean, it's of a piece of so many of the things other nations are doing. That there's a lot of security assistance going to Ukraine that doesn't come from the United States, and those countries don't always talk about it. Some do, some don't, and we have to respect that. And we would hope that you would understand that as well. I mean, the goal here is to help Ukraine defend itself. The goal here is to help Ukraine have its sovereignty respected, have this war end, have the Russians leave. And if that means in the pursuit of that goal that we're going to be a little less transparent about a capability here or there, we can live with that. Yeah. Yeah, live with that. Either one of you. Mike, I know what you're going to ask about. Go ahead.
Hi, Brian Emerson with Aviation Week. I was hoping you could further clarify the Phoenix Ghosts. There's 121 that were in the Air Force stocks. Earlier today, in the defense official briefing said that these were developed by the Air Force in response specifically to Ukrainian requirements.
It was developed before. Obviously, this was a system in development before. I mean, you're not going to have 120 on your shelves if you just started buying them on the 24th of February. What I probably wasn't as well worded as I should have been, or it should have been, but it was developed for a set of requirements that very closely match what the Ukrainians need right now in Donbass. Okay.
The Air Force is referring everything to OSD, so I'd ask you, do you know where this lived in the Air Force? Was it a research lab thing? Was it a capabilities office?
I don't. Mike,
Yeah,
please don't ask me an artillery question.
Actually, well, thanks for identifying them as M777s. That was one of my questions.
I knew. That's why we put it up there.
I appreciate it. And I want to ask you about the disposition of the fuses that will be going with the artillery rounds. But I was asking, you did talk about that they're coming from Army and Marine Corps stocks. So are they in like storage somewhere? But I mean, you're not stripping them from units and sending them out there, right? I mean,
we're canvassing the force. I suspect that these 72 will also come from a mix of Army and Marine Corps stocks. But I honestly don't know where every system's coming from, like whether it was a system in storage or one that was being used by a unit. I suspect it'll be a blend of that. But as with every other system we're providing, we are mindful of our own readiness concerns, and we want to make sure that that our own combat readiness is not affected in a negative way by these provisions. So I couldn't tell you where each and every howitzer is coming from,
Okay.
but it'll clearly be a blend of Army and Marine Corps.
I do have a non-artillery follow-up.
Thank goodness.
Times of London said that a Navy P-8 Poseidon from Sigonella was tracking the Moskva before it was attacked by Ukraine and provided them targeting information. Can you confirm or say anything about that one way or the other?
Yeah, I mean, I saw some of that reporting. I'm not going to get into great operational detail here, but as part of our bolstering NATO's eastern flank and our air policing efforts, P-8s have been a part of that, and that includes air policing missions in the Black Sea region. P-8 is, as you know, a very capable ASW and reconnaissance platform. It does a lot of things. It does a lot of things well, and it's built into our air policing and NATO Eastern Flank efforts. And I'm just going to leave it at that.
But the issue about them providing, I mean, whether or not they provided them targeting information to Ukraine would seem to veer perilously close to acting as a belligerent.
There was no provision of targeting information by the United States Navy P-8 or any United States Navy P-8 flying in these air policing missions. So I can disabuse you of that. Rio.
Thank you. I want to ask you about the Secretary's call with the Chinese Defense Minister yesterday.
Yeah.
After the first direct conversation, is the Secretary less concerned that China could provide the military support to Russia?
Again, without getting into more of the details of the call, Rio, I would just tell you we continue to see no indication that the Chinese have provided military assistance to Russia.
Quick follow-up. So you said previously the proper Chinese counterpart to the U.S. Secretary of Defense is the Vice Chairman of the Central Military Commission. Are you working on another call with the Vice Chairman in the near term?
I don't have any future calls to speak to or to lay out on the schedule. This was an initial call. We felt it was a productive one, and our expectation is that it will lead to future conversations appropriate to whatever the issue is we want to talk about. Okay? Yeah, in the back there.
Mike Stone from Reuters. The 184,000 artillery rounds that have now gone into this now 8th tranche and all of them in total. What's the current estimate and how long those are going to last for?
I think how long they're going to last for, Mike, depends on what the consumption rate is by the Ukrainians once they're in the field. I couldn't possibly predict that. It's going to depend on the operations on any given day.
So this is the third unmanned system that's being proliferated into the environment over there. What's happening with the intelligence and surveillance data that's coming off of the Switchblades, the Phoenix Ghost tactical UASs, and the coastal ships? Is the U.S. able to see simultaneously what's coming off those platforms?
Those are tactical systems for which we wouldn't have a feed into, and what's happening to whatever information they're gleaning from these systems, you'd have to ask them. I would remind that the Phoenix Ghosts are not in the country at this point. So, yeah, in the back there.
John, a British official says that Russia is using up to 20,000 mercenaries in the war on Ukraine. Vladimir Putin said last month he would recruit people from the Middle East. What do we know about the use of foreign fighters today by Russia, where they might be coming from, how many are there, and is Putin trying to use these foreign fighters so his own men don't get killed?
Can't verify the numbers. I just have not seen a number that we can independently verify like that. We do believe that the Russians have recruited foreign fighters. We believe that that there are. Oh, you better get that. That there are foreign fighters, mercenaries, Wagner Group inside Ukraine, in particular in the east. But again, I couldn't quantify that for you. Look. I would say a couple of things on the larger picture. One, it's not unusual for them to do this. It is additional manpower. That they are recruiting so aggressively, I think does indicate their belief that they need to rely on additional manpower because they know they have taken losses, because they have some battalion tactical groups that have been depleted. So I think it is a statement of need of more manpower because of the losses that they've sustained. But it is a tactic they've used before, this use of foreign fighters. You know, it would be wrong to say that that by using foreign fighters we have sort of greater worries about brutality, because the Russian forces themselves have been brutal in some of the worst ways. But it is, I think, a statement of Mr. Putin's desire to bolster his manpower in response to the depletion of that manpower over the last 6 weeks. Yeah.
Is there any update that you might have on the blockade of grain shipments out of the Mariupol area? That had been something that's causing the world a great deal of stress.
I don't have any data on that. We know that the Russians have continued to prevent the ports like Mariupol and Odessa from exporting in an effort to strangle the Ukrainian economy. That we believe that effort is still ongoing, but I couldn't tell you what the economic impact is. That's just not something that we're tracking.
But the status of the blockade and any efforts to stop the blockade or to break it, is there any organized discussion about that you know of that how to address that blockade and break it so that the world actually can receive some of these food sources?
If you're asking, is the United States Navy going to get involved in operations in the Black Sea, the answer is no, in terms of breaking a blockade. Look, this is just another piece of evidence of the brutality with which the Russians are waging this war, and we continue to condemn it, continue to urge Mr. Putin to end the war now, sit down in good faith with President Zelensky, move his forces out, move his ships away, and respect Ukrainian sovereignty. I just have time for a couple more, and I haven't taken any from the phone, but I do have to get going here. Tara Kopp.
Hey, John, thanks for taking this. I wanted to get back to something you said at the top about the consultative group next week at Ramstein. You said it's you feel it's time to take a longer view. Do you mean to say talking about the long-term footprint in Europe, or the longer-term view for the Battle of Ukraine, and what does that mean, really?
What I talked about, and if I wasn't clear enough, I'll try it again. That part of the agenda will be to talk about Ukraine's long-term defense needs in a post-war environment, and what that might look like. So the Secretary wants to. He believes that it's not too soon to begin to have a longer-term discussion with allies and partners about what Ukrainian sovereignty needs to look like going forward.
So you're talking about like reconstruction funding and stuff like that?
Not necessarily reconstruction funds, but defense needs, their security needs, longer term. Caitlin from Stars and Stripes.
Hi, John. About the sanctions that you were issued with, you were also listed with several journalists as well. I'm wondering what you think this says about the effects of American media and your own public information about those efforts, and what if they had on this conflict, especially internationally and in Russia?
It's a good group to belong to, and I think it does say a bit about the fear of fact, the fear of truth that Mr. Putin continues to demonstrate every day. And you can see that by the way he has shut down information inside his own country. The only way the Russians can get any kind of information is through state-run propaganda voices and organs. And I think it demonstrates a sense of weakness, not strength, that he so abhors the work of independent journalists and the coverage of the brutality and the atrocities that his troops are conducting inside Ukraine. So I mean, again, I have no nobody called me from the Kremlin to advise me that I was being sanctioned or why, but I have to assume that that this effort, both by the United States government, certainly the Department of Defense, as well as you and your colleagues in covering this war, unsettles Mr. Putin. Frankly, I think that's a good thing. Okay, listen, I got to go. I ran a little bit long. I apologize I didn't get to everybody, but we'll see you again tomorrow.
Wasn't that a spam call you got?